At my daughter's engagement party, my son, a police officer, pulled me aside and whispered, "Dad, something about this wedding. It's not right. Something's off with them." I looked back at my daughter and her fiancé, suddenly uneasy, but I said nothing. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling, so I started digging quietly. 2 days later, my lawyer called me, and what he said hit me so hard I nearly collapsed. Welcome to my channel. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and tell me where you're watching from. If you heard that kind of warning at your own daughter's engagement, would you trust it or ignore it? Comment below. This is a fictional story enhanced for a richer experience. Any names or events are coincidental, but it carries a meaningful and beneficial message. The crunch of fine desert gravel under my Italian loafers was the only sound that felt real. Everything else, the rhythmic clinking of crystal flutes, the soft jazz drifting from the poolside speakers, and the forced laughter of 65 high society guests, felt like a high-budget stage play. It was 7:45 p.m. on a crisp October Tuesday in Paradise Valley. Above us, the jagged silhouette of Camelback Mountain stood like a silent sentry against the indigo Arizona sky. My estate was glowing, draped in thousands of fairy lights that mirrored the stars, but a cold knot was tightening in my chest. At the center of the patio stood my daughter Bryn. At 29, she looked radiant in a navy silk dress that caught the moonlight, her hand tucked firmly into the arm of Dr. Dominic Vale. Dominic was 37, a renowned psychologist with a smile that was a little too symmetrical and a handshake that was a little too firm. He was perfect, the kind of perfect that usually hides a hollow core. I adjusted my tie, feeling the weight of my role as the chief financial officer of a Fortune 500 company. I was trained to spot a bad investment from a mile away, and looking at Dominic, my gut was screaming, "Deficit." "Dad, you're brooding again," a voice muttered beside me. I turned to see Tyler, my youngest. At 26, he had my jawline but his mother's observant eyes. He wasn't wearing a tuxedo like the other men. He opted for a black tactical vest over a charcoal shirt, looking every bit the fraud department detective he was. He held a scotch but hadn't touched a drop. "So just taking it all in into..." I replied, forcing a smile. "It's a big night." "Too big," Tyler whispered, his eyes scanning the crowd. At exactly 7:48 p.m., Tyler's pocket buzzed. It wasn't a casual text. I watched his face drain of color as he checked his department-issued phone. The blue light reflected in his eyes, showing a high-priority financial crimes alert. He didn't say a word, but the muscle in his jaw clamped shut. He leaned in, his voice barely a breath against the desert wind. "Dad. Dark garden. Now. It's about Bryn's foundation." We moved through the shadows, away from the white catering tents and the smell of seared scallops. Once we reached the edge of the property, where the manicured lawn met the raw desert brush, Tyler turned to me. "I just got a flag from the Bureau's monitoring system," he said, his voice shaking with suppressed rage. 3 days ago, on October 21st, there was a $180,000 transfer out of Bryn's charity account. It was routed through 3 shell companies before landing in an LLC registered to Dominic Vale. The air felt like it had been sucked out of my lungs. $180,000. That wasn't a mistake. It was a heist. "How long do we have?" I asked, my professional mask snapping into place. The audit trails are messy, but the feds will pick this up in less than a week. If this goes federal, Bryn is the one whose name is on the filing papers. She'll be the one in the jumpsuit, not him. I looked back toward the lights of the party. "Meet me at the office tomorrow morning, 6 a.m. sharp. Don't mention this to anyone, not even your sister." "Not yet." We walked back into the fray of the party, as if our world hadn't just tilted on its axis. I stood by the bar, watching Bryn toast a group of family friends. She was laughing, but for the first time I looked past the navy silk and the expensive jewelry. Under the harsh glow of the patio lights, I saw it. Her makeup was caked on unusually thick, an amateur's attempt to hide the dark, sunken circles under her eyes. When she lifted her glass to take a sip of champagne, her fingers weren't just moving, they were trembling so violently that the liquid nearly sloshed over the rim. Dominic reached out, placing a possessive hand on her lower back, and I saw her flinch, a micro-expression of pure, unadulterated fear that vanished a second later. Dominic whispered something in her ear, and she gave the guests a practiced porcelain smile. She had no idea that the silent father she adored was now standing in the shadows, holding the fuse to the bomb that was about to destroy her life. "What have you gotten yourself into, sweetheart?" I thought, my heart aching as the jazz music played on, masking the sound of my daughter's crumbling world. The last valet had long since driven away, and the heavy oak doors of the Paradise Valley estate were finally bolted shut. It was 11:30 p.m. Silence, heavy and suffocating, had replaced the jazz and the clinking of glasses. I sat in my second-floor study, the only room in this sprawling mansion that actually felt like mine. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, Camelback Mountain was a jagged ink blot against a sea of city lights. My tie was pulled loose, draped like a noose around my neck, and the glow from my desk lamp was the only thing cutting through the gloom. My laptop sat open, its cooling fan whirring like a heartbeat, but the screen had long since timed out. My eyes were fixed on a silver-framed photograph on the corner of the mahogany desk. It was taken in the summer of 2001. A younger, less tired version of myself stood on a pier in Maine, squinting into the sun. Beside me, Sarah was laughing, her hair caught in the Atlantic breeze. A 7-year-old Bryn was making a face at the camera, and baby Tyler was a bundle of blankets in Sarah's arms. We looked like the American dream personified. But looking at it now, all I could see were the cracks I had ignored for decades. The year 2019 was the year the dream shattered. It was June, the kind of brutal Arizona summer where the heat feels like a physical weight. Sarah, at 53, had always found peace in the stillness of the Superstition Mountains. She was an experienced hiker, but the desert is unforgiving. A loose rock, a momentary lapse in footing on a steep ravine, and she was gone. She didn't suffer, the rangers said it was instantaneous, but the irony was a jagged pill to swallow. While Sarah was taking her final breath in the silence of the canyons, I was 30,000 feet in the air flying to New York to close a $40 million acquisition. I wasn't there to hold her hand. I wasn't there to say goodbye. I was busy making numbers move on a spreadsheet. At the funeral, as the bagpipes wailed and the dry desert wind whipped the black veils of the mourners, I looked at my children. Bryn, 24 and freshly graduated, looked like a ghost. Tyler, 21 and still in college, had eyes that were hard and distant. It was in that moment, staring at the mahogany casket, that the truth hit me like a physical blow. I had been absent for 25 years. I had traded my family's milestones for quarterly earnings and boardroom victories. I stepped down as CEO of Caldwell Financial Group a month later, taking the quiet title of chairman. I couldn't bring Sarah back, but I could try to buy back my soul. In 2020, I took $87 million, a combination of Sarah's life insurance and my own diversified portfolio, and established the Caldwell Family Foundation. It was a tribute to Sarah's lifelong advocacy for mental health. She had struggled with her own dark clouds of depression in private, a secret we kept behind our manicured hedges. I asked Bryn, who had just finished her MBA, to be the executive director. She threw herself into it with a passion that terrified me. It was her way of staying connected to a mother who was no longer there. For a while, I thought I was winning. Tyler joined the Scottsdale Police Department in 2021, and by early 2023 he had worked his way up to a detective in the Financial Crimes Unit. We started having Sunday dinners. I was finally present. I was finally the father they deserved. Then came Dominic Vale. They met in August 2022 at a Phoenix mental health conference. He was the keynote speaker, a PhD with 3 bestsellers and a voice like velvet. When Bryn brought him to dinner that September, I watched him closely. He was charming, yes. He was articulate. But as a CFO, I was trained to look for the fudge factor in every presentation. Dominic's personality felt rehearsed like a brand rather than a man. But Bryn was smiling, truly smiling, for the first time since the accident. So I stayed silent. I let him in. He proposed at the Desert Botanical Garden under a canopy of blooming cactus 3 weeks ago. Tonight was supposed to be the celebration of her new life. Instead, it felt like the beginning of an autopsy. I reached out and touched the glass over Sarah's face. "I promised I'd watch over them, Sarah," I whispered into the empty room. My voice sounded thin, brittle. I promised I wouldn't let them fall, but Tyler's words from the garden were echoing in my head louder than the silence. $180,000. Dominic's LLC. If Bryn was moving money, if she was compromising the foundation we built in her mother's name, I needed to know why. Was she a victim, or was she an accomplice? I opened the top drawer of my desk and pulled out a thick, cream-colored business card. Rebecca Strand, attorney at law. Rebecca had been our family lawyer for 20 years, the only person I trusted to navigate the shark-infested waters of high-stakes litigation. If Dominic Vale was the reason my daughter was breaking the law, he was about to find out that a father with nothing left to lose is the most dangerous auditor in the world. I stared at the card, my thumb tracing the embossed letters. The perfect Dr. Vale had no idea that the silent man at the party wasn't just a grieving widower. He was a man who had already failed his wife once. He wasn't going to fail his daughter. The espresso machine hissed a sharp mechanical sound that cut through the oppressive stillness of the kitchen. I didn't want a latte or anything with foam, just black, strong enough to scrub the exhaustion from my brain. It was 8 a.m. on Wednesday, October 25th. I sat at the expansive granite island, my hands wrapped around a heavy ceramic mug. Outside, the Arizona sun was already beginning to bake the patio, where only 12 hours ago we were celebrating a union that now felt like a floral-scented trap. As the caffeine hit my system, my mind began to do what it does best: audit the past 14 months. I needed to see where the numbers didn't add up. It started in August 2022. I remember Bryn bursting through the front door after a weekend mental health conference in downtown Phoenix. Her eyes hadn't looked that bright in years. "Dad, you have to meet him," she'd said, breathless. Dr. Dominic Vale. He gave the keynote on the empathy framework. His work on trauma therapy is groundbreaking. He's not just a clinician, he's a visionary. I did what any protective father and any CFO would do. I looked him up. His digital footprint was pristine, a sleek professional website, a PhD from a university in Oregon, a talk on a major global video platform with over 200,000 views. He owned a high-end clinic in North Scottsdale. On paper, he was a catch, 36 years old, successful, and seemingly devoted to the same causes Sarah had loved. I saw the credentials and the polished About Me section, and for the first time, I didn't dig deeper. I didn't verify the Oregon transcript. I wanted to believe the brochure. From September 2022 through early 2023, the courtship was a masterclass in American romanticism. Dominic was attentive in a way that felt almost cinematic. Weekly bouquets of lilies, Sarah's favorite, which Bryn had mentioned once in passing, arrived at the foundation office. He remembered her favorite obscure roast of coffee and the exact indie movies she liked. I met him for dinner 4 or 5 times during those months. He was polite, deferential even. He asked about my career at Caldwell Financial and expressed deep admiration for the foundation's endowment strategy. But even then, sitting over dry-aged ribeye at the Capitol Grill, a small chill had settled in my marrow. Dominic didn't ask about Bryn's childhood or her dreams. He asked about the board structure. He wanted to know how the $87 million was invested and what the succession protocol looked like for the family trust. "Just curious about the legacy you're building, Preston," he'd say with that symmetrical, practiced smile. I brushed it off. I told myself he was just a pragmatic man looking out for his future wife. Then came March 2023, red flag number 1. Bryn came to me glowing to tell me that Dominic had offered his services to the Caldwell Family Foundation as a pro bono consultant. He wanted to provide trauma-informed training for our staff free of charge. I felt a knot of discomfort. Business and family are a volatile mix, and adding a romantic partner to the boardroom felt like inviting a storm into a glass house. "Honey, let's keep his work and your work separate," I'd cautioned. But Bryn insisted. She called it a gift of love. Reluctantly, I agreed. Dominic attended 2 board meetings, one in March, another in May. He was smooth. Too smooth. He charmed the other directors, speaking our language of ROI and impact metrics while weaving in psychological jargon. By the end of the second meeting, the board was ready to hand him the keys to the city. The second flag was planted during Thanksgiving in November 2022. The house smelled of rosemary and turkey. It was supposed to be a safe space, but as we sat in the study after dinner, Dominic leaned back in the leather chair, swirling a glass of expensive port. "Preston," he said, his voice casual, "with the foundation growing and Tyler in the police force, have you tightened up the family trust? I mean, do you have a clear succession plan if something happens?" The question felt like a needle under my fingernail. I gave him a vague corporate answer about standard legal protections and watched his eyes. He didn't blink. He just smiled, nodded, and dropped the topic as quickly as he'd raised it. But the thought haunted me. Why is a man who hasn't even bought a ring yet so worried about the inheritance? By the summer of 2023, the vibrant daughter I knew began to fade. Between July and September, Bryn looked perpetually frazzled. When I asked her about it, she waved it off, blaming a looming foundation audit and a mountain of paperwork. But I saw the physical toll. She had lost at least 10 pounds. The navy dress she wore last night had hung off her frame. And then there was the makeup, thick, heavy layers of foundation and concealer. She was trying to paint a mask of health over eyes that looked like they hadn't seen deep sleep in months. When Dominic proposed in early October at the Desert Botanical Garden, she had called me crying. He asked me to marry him. I had said all the right things. I had congratulated them. I had hosted the party. But as I stood on that patio watching her hand tremble against his suit jacket, that inner voice, the one that had made me a billionaire, was screaming, "Something is wrong. The math is off." I hadn't listened because I was a coward. I was so desperate to be the present father who didn't ruin things that I had ignored the predator in the room. I had wanted her to have the happiness I had robbed from her mother by always being at the office. But Tyler's alert changed everything. $180,000. Suspicious transfers. Dominic's LLC. The numbers didn't lie. My instincts had been right all along, and my silence had been my daughter's undoing. I finished the dregs of my cold coffee, the bitterness matching my mood. I checked my watch. 8:15 a.m. My son would be on his way. I picked up my phone and sent a short, sharp text to Tyler. "I'm ready. Come over now if you can. Bring everything you have on the LLC." I stood up, walked to the window, and looked out at the desert. The time for being a present father was over. Now it was time to be the man I had been for 40 years, the one who finds the fraud and cuts it out at the root. The heavy oak door of my study clicked shut, sealing the world out. It was 8:30 a.m. Tyler looked like a man who had spent the last 12 hours staring into the abyss. He was still wearing the black tactical vest from the party. His white dress shirt underneath, wrinkled and stained with sweat. Dark stubble shadowed his jaw, and his eyes were bloodshot, vibrating with a frantic, nervous energy. He didn't say hello. He just walked to the mahogany desk, cleared a space among my leather-bound ledgers, and dropped a thick manila folder. Beside it, he flipped open his department-issued laptop, the fan whirring loudly in the morning quiet. "I didn't go home, Dad," Tyler said, his voice gravelly from lack of sleep. I went straight to the precinct. I've been running queries through the federal network all night. He turned the screen toward me. It was a FinCEN alert report, the kind of document that usually signals the end of a career or the beginning of a prison sentence. Check alert number 1. Tyler pointed to a line of glowing text. October 21st, 2023. A transfer of $180,000 from the Caldwell Family Foundation's main operating account directly into Bryn's personal checking. The system flagged it immediately. No board authorization was attached, and the memo was left blank. It's a textbook red flag. My stomach did a slow, nauseating flip. Maybe it was a mistake, an emergency expense for the wedding. Tyler didn't look up. He just scrolled down. Alert number 2, October 22nd, the very next day. $150,000 in cash was withdrawn from Bryn's personal account. But look at the locations, Dad. I leaned in my glasses, sliding down my nose. I read the entries, each one feeling like a punch to the gut. 11 a.m. Bellagio Casino, Las Vegas, $50,000. 1:30 p.m. Aria Resort, Las Vegas, $50,000. 4:45 p.m. Wynn Casino, Las Vegas, $50,000. The breath left my body in a ragged hiss. Las Vegas. That's impossible. Bryn told me she was in Tucson visiting you last weekend. She said you two went hiking in Sabino Canyon. Tyler finally looked at me, and the pity in his eyes was worse than the data on the screen. I haven't seen Bryn in 3 weeks, Dad. I was working double shifts on a mortgage fraud case. She lied to you. She wasn't in Tucson. She was in Vegas burning through foundation cash. I sank into my leather chair, the room spinning. Bryn didn't gamble. She didn't even like the noise of a casino floor. Sarah had raised her to be frugal, to respect the weight of a dollar. But there's more. Tyler set his fingers dancing across the keyboard. I did a deep dive into the last 18 months. I shouldn't have accessed these records without a warrant. It's a legal gray area, but she's my sister. I had to know. He opened a spreadsheet that looked like a spider web of deceit. This isn't just one bad weekend, Dad. It's a pattern. Since April 2022, a total of $85 million has disappeared from the foundation. It's being drained through a series of fake invoices for strategic consulting paid to shell companies. Most of it is being wired offshore Cayman Islands, Bahamas. But about $600,000 has been pulled out as cold cash in Vegas and Atlantic City. Systematic embezzlement. I whispered the words, tasting like ash. For 18 months. What, 18 months? Tyler confirmed. Right about the time she started getting serious with Dominic. My voice was shaking now, the CFO in me fighting the father. Why would she do this, Ty? The foundation is her entire life. It's Sarah's legacy. It's the only thing we have left of your mother. Tyler pulled a printed document from the manila folder and slid it across the desk. It was an LLC registration from Delaware. Entity name, Saguaro Wellness Advisors, LLC. Date of incorporation, September 2022. Members, Dominic Vale, Bryn Caldwell. The $180,000 from the alert. It hit this LLC first. Tyler explained, tapping the paper. Then it was routed to Vegas. Bryn isn't just a victim here, Dad. She's a co-founder. She's doing this with Dominic. They're using the foundation as their personal ATM. I put my head in my hands, the weight of the realization crushing me. My daughter, my bright, compassionate Bryn, was a criminal, and the man she was about to marry wasn't just a husband. He was an accomplice. Or worse, a puppet master. My daughter is a thief. I groaned into my palms, and I gave her the keys to the vault. Tyler walked around the desk and put a heavy hand on my shoulder. His voice softened, losing the detective's edge for a moment. Or he got her into something she can't get out of. We've seen this before, Dad. Predators find a vulnerability like Bryn's grief over Mom and they exploit it until there's nothing left. We need to find out if she's the mastermind or the hostage. I looked up, my eyes burning, the grief turning into a cold, hard resolve. What's the timeline, Tyler? How long before this goes official, before the sirens show up at our front gate? Tyler checked a timestamp on the monitor. The only reason the feds haven't knocked yet is because I put a silent watch on the Foundation's accounts 6 months ago. Just a precaution I took when Bryn took over. The alert hit my desk first, but I can't keep it hidden forever. If another analyst at the Bureau sees this, or if the next transaction triggers a secondary flag, we have 5 to 7 days max before this escalates to a federal level. I stood up, adjusting my shirt. The exhaustion was gone, replaced by the same icy clarity I used to have when a merger was going south. 1 week, I said, staring at the photo of Sarah on the desk. We have 1 week to find the truth. If she's a victim, we save her. If she's the mastermind, we stop her before she destroys everything your mother stood for. I looked at my son, the detective, and the father, finally on the same side of the glass. Start with Dominic's clinic. I want to know every cent that goes in and out of that place. And Tyler, don't let her know we're watching. Not yet. The elevator climbed silently to the 12th floor of a steel and glass tower in downtown Scottsdale. It was 10 a.m. on October 25th. Inside, the air was cold, but Tyler and I were both radiating a feverish, unsettled heat. Rebecca Strand's office was exactly like her: sharp, expensive, and intimidating. Rebecca had been our family's legal compass for 15 years. She had handled Sarah's estate, my corporate mergers, and the very blueprints of the Caldwell Family Foundation. When she saw us, Tyler still in his disheveled gear, and me with a face that felt like it was carved from granite, she didn't offer coffee. She just closed the heavy mahogany door and sat behind her desk. I briefed her quickly, laying out Tyler's findings like a deck of cards. Rebecca didn't interrupt. She took notes with a silver fountain pen, her expression turning from professional curiosity to a deep, heavy gravity. "Preston," she said, leaning back, her short gray hair catching the morning light. "This is a nightmare scenario. You mentioned the foundation receives federal grants." "Yes," I replied. $2 million annually from HHS for rural mental health outreach. Rebecca's eyes sharpened. "Then we're not just talking about local embezzlement. Under Title 18, Section 666 of the U.S., code theft from an organization receiving federal funds is a major federal crime. If the Department of Justice opens a case, Bryn is looking at up to 10 years in federal prison. If Dominic is proven to be an accomplice, they'll add a conspiracy charge. That's another 5 to 10 years. The room felt like it was losing oxygen. "What if she was coerced?" I asked, my voice straining. "What if she's a victim of his manipulation?" "We would need to prove duress or undue influence." Rebecca said, her voice clinical but not unkind. "But Tyler's evidence is a problem, Preston. She co-signed the LLC. She made the transfers herself. On paper, she's a voluntary participant. However, if we can prove Dominic deceived her about the endgame, if he was pulling the strings while she thought the money was going elsewhere, and if she cooperates proactively, we might be able to negotiate a plea." "What do we need to do?" Tyler asked, his jaw set. "Two things." Rebecca held up 2 fingers. "First, we need Dominic's history. If he's a career con artist, we establish a pattern of predatory behavior. Second, we need internal communications. We need to see how he spoke to her, how he convinced her to move that first dollar. We need the lie." She reached into her desk and pulled out a plain, matte black business card. "Lucas Mercer, Private Investigations." Lucas is an ex-Phoenix PD detective, 18 years in financial fraud. If Dominic Vale has a skeleton in his closet, Lucas will rip the door off the hinges to find it. I didn't wait. I called Lucas right there in Rebecca's office. He agreed to meet us at 2 p.m. at his office in Tempe. Before we left, Rebecca grabbed my arm, her grip surprisingly strong. Preston, listen to me. Do not confront Bryn or Dominic yet. Not a word. Not a look. If they realize you're onto them, they will destroy the digital trail or simply disappear. We need to move quietly, and we need to move fast. How much time do we have? I asked. Tyler said 5 to 7 days before the feds flag it. Rebecca calculated. I'd say we have 10 days maximum to gather our own evidence, confront Bryn, and decide our next move. If we go to the feds first with evidence of her cooperation, we control the narrative. If they come for her first, she's just another defendant in a jumpsuit. At 2 p.m., the atmosphere shifted from corporate polish to industrial grit. Lucas Mercer's office in Tempe was a cluttered maze of filing cabinets, monitors, and the faint smell of stale coffee. Lucas himself was 49 with a salt and pepper beard and a faded blazer over jeans. He didn't look like a high-priced investigator, but his eyes were like lasers. He listened to the story while leaning back in a squeaky chair. You want the full workup on Dr. Dominic Vale, Lucas summarized. The financials, criminal history, past relationships, employment verification, the whole 9 yards. Whatever it takes, I said. My usual rate is $200 an hour, Lucas said, tapping a pen against his desk. But for a high-stakes rush like this, I want an $18,000 retainer for 1 week of intensive 24/7 digging. If I don't find anything useful, I'll refund half. But I usually find something. Done, I said without hesitation. How soon can you start? I started while you were talking. Lucas replied, his fingers already flying across a mechanical keyboard. Give me his full name, date of birth, and social security number. I provided the info from the Foundation's consultant contract Dominic had signed last March. Lucas entered the data, his brow furrowed, as he watched 3 different monitors flicker with data streams. Interesting, Lucas muttered, leaning closer to a screen. His SSN is legit, issued in the Midwest 30 years ago. But you said he had a PhD from the University of Oregon. Keynote speaker, author of the Empathy Framework, I confirmed. Lucas frowned, his eyes scanning a database of academic alumni. I'm not seeing a Dominic Vale in the Oregon Alumni Registry for that time period. Not for a PhD, not even for an undergrad. It could be a clerical error, but I'm going to call the registrar directly. If he's faking the degree, the whole Empathy Framework is a house of cards. The drive back to Paradise Valley was silent until we hit the outskirts of Scottsdale. The sun was beginning to dip, casting long golden shadows across the desert floor. Tyler. I said, my hands tight on the steering wheel. I need you to do something harder than any undercover work you've ever done. I need you to act normal. When we see Bryn, when we're at dinner, I don't let her know. Don't let her see the detective in your eyes. Tyler let out a shaky breath, looking out the window at the passing cacti. Dad, she's my sister. I don't know if I can look her in the eye and pretend everything is fine while I'm thinking about federal sentencing guidelines. You have to, I insisted, my voice cracking. Because if Dominic is the puppet master and Bryn is still salvageable, we can't spook him. If he runs now, he takes the truth with him. We need him comfortable. We need him arrogant. Tyler nodded slowly, his silence a heavy agreement. As we pulled into the gates of the estate, I looked at the dark windows of the house. I was about to find out if my daughter was a criminal or a victim. And as the gates hissed shut behind us, I realized I didn't know which answer I was more afraid of. The dry Arizona heat radiated off the salt-dusted rim of my water glass, making the 95-degree afternoon feel even more oppressive. It was 12:30 p.m. on October 26th. I sat on the patio of the Mission in Old Town Scottsdale. the smell of roasted peppers and expensive tequila filling the air. I had texted Bryn this morning with a simple bait. Lunch today, want to discuss the wedding budget. Her reply had been uncharacteristically hesitant, a fragile, sure dad, just us, that told me she was already looking for a shield. I arrived 10 minutes early, choosing a corner table that gave me a clear view of the entrance. When Bryn finally walked in, my stomach did a slow, nauseating flip. Even under the bright sun, she looked frail. She wore a yellow sundress that should have looked cheerful, but it hung loosely on her frame, highlighting a weight loss that was far too rapid to be healthy. Oversized sunglasses covered half her face, but they couldn't hide the caked-on foundation she was using to mask the exhaustion underneath. She gave me a hug, but her body was stiff like a coiled spring. "You look busy, honey," I said as we sat. "How's the foundation? I assume you're getting ready for the board meeting next week." Bryn avoided eye contact, her fingers immediately starting to shred her linen napkin. "Yeah, everything is fine, Dad. Just busy season. You know how it is." She didn't look fine. She looked like she was vibrating with a silent scream. I ordered the grilled salmon. She asked for a chicken salad she'd barely touch. We kept the conversation on the surface, the venue at the Scottsdale Resort, the guest list of 120, the bridesmaid drama. For a moment she laughed, and I saw a glimpse of the daughter I used to know. Then, at 12:55 p.m., the shadow fell over the table. "Hey, Bryn texted me you guys were here, hope you don't mind me crashing." Dominic Vale stood there looking like the cover of a luxury lifestyle magazine in a crisp white polo and dark jeans. He flashed that symmetrical, practiced smile and pulled up a chair before I could even offer. She called him. I realized my blood turning to ice. She was scared to be alone with me. Of course not Dominic. "Join us," I said, forcing a smile that felt like it was made of dry wood. He ordered an iced tea and leaned back, radiating an effortless charm that felt entirely predatory. "How's the market treating Caldwell Financial, Preston? I read your Q1 report this morning. Those returns are impressive, even by your standards." "We had a good quarter," I replied, my voice flat. "You've built an incredible legacy." Dominic said, his eyes locking onto mine. "Bryn actually showed me some of the family trust documents recently. Truly a sophisticated structure. Most people don't think that far ahead." The alarm in my head went from a hum to a roar. Those trust documents were private, locked in a secure vault at the office, and a digital backup only the three of us could access. Why would Bryn show him that? "The trust is just a safety net, Dominic," I said carefully. "Standard estate planning for a family like ours." Dominic leaned in his tone, shifting to that of a curious academic. "I'm actually writing a chapter for my next book on the psychology of family wealth. I was wondering, from a technical standpoint, what kind of scenarios allow for a distribution outside the normal schedule? Hypothetically, of course." I took a slow sip of my water. "Why do you ask?" "Just research," he said smoothly. "For example, if a family entity, say Bryn's Foundation, faced an unexpected crisis, an audit issue or a legal claim, could you release trust funds to bridge that gap to protect the family name?" The table went silent. I felt the weight of the question like a physical pressure. He wasn't asking for a book. He was testing the locks on my safe. He knew the $1. 85 million was gone, and he was checking to see if I'd pay to hide the crime. The trust and the foundation are separate entities. "Dominic," I said, my voice turning cold. "And why would the foundation have a crisis? Bryn runs it impeccably." "Right, honey." I glanced at Bryn. She was staring at her untouched plate, her face frozen in a mask of terror. Dominic laughed, a hollow, cheerful sound. "Of course, just a hypothetical. Ignore me, I'm always in researcher mode. It's a professional hazard." The rest of the lunch was a blur of thick tension. I watched Dominic place a possessive hand on Bryn's shoulder, and I saw her flinch, a micro-expression of pure fear that she immediately tried to cover with a plastered-on smile. At 1:15 p.m., Dominic stood up to use the restroom. The moment the door closed behind him, the air seemed to rush back into the space. "Print," I whispered, leaning in. "Is everything okay? You seem stressed." Her eyes suddenly welled with tears, but she didn't let them fall. "Dad, I need to talk to you about something. Soon. But not now. Please. Honey, whatever it is, I can help. I'm scared, Dad." She whispered, her voice trembling so violently I could barely hear it. "But I can't talk here. Not with him." Dominic returned before I could say another word. Bryn's face reset instantly. The smile was back perfect and porcelain. I paid the bill, my hands steady only through sheer force of will. In the parking lot, the heat felt like a furnace. I hugged Bryn goodbye, and for a split second she clung to me like a drowning person. "I'm sorry," she breathed into my ear, so quiet I almost missed it. I watched them drive away in Dominic's silver sedan. I got into my own car, but I didn't start the engine. I sat there as my hands began to shake, the reality of my daughter's terror finally hitting me. I pulled out my phone and sent a text to Tyler. Dominic just probed the trust structure. He's looking for a way to cover the hole. Bryn is terrified she's breaking. We are running out of time. The rattle of the ancient air conditioning unit in Lucas Mercer's Tempe office provided a restless soundtrack to the silence. It was 5:00 p.m. on October 28th. Files were stacked like crooked towers on every available surface, and the smell of ozone from a bank of humming monitors filled the cramped space. Tyler and I sat in mismatched chairs, our eyes fixed on the manila folder Lucas was sliding across his scarred oak desk. I spent 48 hours straight digging through registrar archives and county court dockets. Lucas said, his voice sandpaper dry. "Dominic Vale isn't just a liar, Preston. He's a masterpiece of fiction." I opened the report. The first page was a summary that made my blood run cold. Finding one education, fabricated. "I contacted the registrar at the University of Oregon," Lucas explained, leaning forward. "I posed as a background verifier for an executive search firm. There is no record of a Dominic Vale, or any variation of that name, ever attending the university between 2008 and 2015, the years he claims to have earned his PhD. I ran a secondary check on national dissertation databases. Nothing. The man's entire professional credibility, the best-selling book, The Trauma Therapy Clinic in Scottsdale, the high-profile speeches, is built on a foundation of air. So the empathy framework is just a con artist's script." Tyler muttered, his knuckles white as he gripped the armrests. "Yeah, exactly," Lucas nodded. "But wait until you see where he was before he landed in Scottsdale. Page 3, Portland, Oregon. From 2019 to late 2021, Dominic had operated under a different banner, Cascade Wellness Group, LLC. He had marketed himself as an executive coach and nonprofit consultant. It was the same playbook he was using on the Caldwell Family Foundation. Finding the victim, Monica Graves. Lucas pointed to a copy of a civil lawsuit filed in Multnomah County, Oregon in August 2021. Monica Graves versus Dominic Vale. Monica Graves was the director of the Northwest Regional Fund, a nonprofit with a $12 million budget, Lucas said. She hired Dominic to streamline their operations. He did exactly what he's doing to Bryn. He gained her trust, moved into her inner circle, and convinced her to give him temporary administrative access to their accounts. In August 2021, Monica discovered he had drafted a fake board resolution. He was moments away from authorizing a $420,000 transfer to an offshore account in his name. "Why isn't he in jail?" I asked, my voice shaking with a mix of rage and disbelief. "Because he's a professional," Lucas replied grimly. When Monica confronted him and blocked the transfer, Dominic didn't run. He turned the tables. His lawyers threatened a massive defamation lawsuit that would have buried her charity in legal fees. Monica was terrified of the scandal, so she settled. She paid Dominic $80,000 just to sign an NDA and disappear. He dissolved Cascade Wellness and left Oregon with a clean record and a fresh bankroll. Lucas leaned back, his eyes catching the blue light of the monitors. I tracked Monica down. It took some convincing, but once I told her about Bryn and the Caldwell name, she broke her silence. She's willing to testify if we take this to the feds. I've scheduled a secure video call with her for tomorrow at 2 p.m. She wants to warn your daughter before he does to Bryn what he did to her. I stared at the black and white photos of the court documents. This wasn't a man who had made a mistake. This was a predator who moved from city to city, changing his LLCs like a snake sheds its skin. Finding 3. The pattern, Denver. There's more, Lucas added, tapping a smaller file. Preliminary stuff from 2017 to 2019 in Denver. Peak Performance Advisors, LLC. Same structure, same consulting facade. It dissolved right before he moved to Portland. I'm still tracking down the victims there, but I'd bet my retainer the story is the same. I looked at Tyler, who was staring at the report as if it were a bomb. He's a professional predator. I said the words, feeling like stones in my mouth. He finds high-net-worth families with a vulnerability for Monica. It was her charity's growth for Bryn. It was her mother's legacy, and he bleeds them dry. And Bryn is just his latest target. Tyler added, his voice thick with guilt. He's been doing this for years. He knew exactly which buttons to push with her. Lucas shook his head, his gaze turning to me. Not just Bryn Preston. You're the real target. Bryn is just his access point to the Caldwell Trust. He's using her as a human shield and a key to get to the kind of money he's been dreaming about since Denver. Then we need to know the most important thing, I said, standing up and looking out the window toward the Tempe skyline. Does Bryn understand that? Does she know she's being used? Or does she truly believe she's in a partnership with him? Is she a victim of his charm, or has he turned her into an accomplice? Tomorrow, Monica will tell us exactly how his playbook works, Lucas said, closing the folder with a definitive snap. She'll tell us how he isolates them, how he manipulates their emotions until they can't tell the truth from the lie. Then we'll know exactly what Bryn is up against. I walked out of the office, the cool night air of Arizona doing nothing to soothe the fire in my chest. 1 week. We had less than a week before the feds flagged the foundation's missing millions. Now we had the evidence of Dominic's past, but I still didn't have my daughter back. And as I drove home through the desert dark, I realized that saving Bryn might mean destroying the man she thought was her savior. The blue light from the laptop screen was the only thing cutting through the dim afternoon light in Lucas's office. It was 2 p.m. on October 29th. On the screen, a woman in her early 30s appeared. Monica Graves had her brown hair pulled back in a tight ponytail, and her oversized glasses couldn't hide the exhaustion in her eyes. She looked like someone who had survived a shipwreck and was still afraid of the water. Monica, thank you for doing this. Lucas started leaning toward the microphone. This is Preston Caldwell and his son Tyler. Preston's daughter is currently engaged to Dominic Vale. Monica took a sharp, jagged inhale. Her hand flew to her mouth, and for a moment I thought she might disconnect. Oh my God, she whispered, her voice trembling. He's doing it again. He's actually doing it again. She took a moment to steady herself, then began to recount a story that felt like a haunting echo of our own lives. It started in 2020 at a Portland conference on nonprofit leadership. Monica was only 27 then, the rising star and executive director of the Northwest Regional Fund. Dominic had been the keynote speaker. His topic, building trust in nonprofit leadership. He was magnetic. Monica recalled, staring at a point just past the camera. I approached him after his speech and he offered to consult for us for free. He told me he was building his portfolio and loved our mission. By January 2021, he was in my office every week. He was unpaid, helpful, and seemingly selfless. He streamlined our accounting and trained our staff. My board of directors absolutely loved him. I felt a cold weight settle in my chest. It was the exact same entry point he'd used with Bryn. But then, Monica continued, her voice dropping. He started offering me executive coaching sessions to help with my stress. I was vulnerable. I'd just gone through a bad breakup, and I was overworked. I opened up to him. I told him how overwhelmed I felt by the financial oversight of a $12 million budget. That's when he suggested his solution in July 2021. The temporary account management, I muttered, recalling Bryn's recent paperwork stress. Exactly, Monica said, a bitter tear escaping. He told me to focus on the programs while he handled the numbers for 60 days. I thought I only gave him view-only access, but he was smarter than that. He used my login to go deep into the bank portal settings, places I never looked, and granted himself full transfer authority. The climax came on August 12, 2021. Monica's board treasurer had called her confused about a pending $420,000 wire transfer to an account in the Cayman Islands. When Monica checked the system, she found a PDF of a fake board resolution with forged signatures authorizing the move to what was labeled an investment account. I froze the account just in time, Monica said. But when I confronted him the next day, he didn't blink. He sat in his office perfectly calm and told me I was having a mental breakdown. He reminded me that my login had been used. He threatened to sue me for defamation and tortious interference if I ever went public. Half my board actually believed him because he was so credible and I was so unstable. In the end, Monica's lawyer advised her to settle quietly to save the nonprofit's reputation. She paid Dominic $80,000 of her own money just to get him to sign an NDA and disappear. I let him destroy 2 years of my life, Monica said, now crying openly. Preston, if your daughter is with him, he isn't after her. He's after you. He studies people like a psychology experiment. He'll use her until she's worthless to him, then he'll destroy her to cover his tracks. I felt my voice break as I asked the question that had been haunting me. Did he ever love you? Or was it all a lie from the start? Monica looked directly into the camera, her expression hard. There was no love, Preston. There was only research. When I became a liability instead of an asset, he discarded me like trash. The call ended in a deafening silence. I sat with my head in my hands, the reality of Dominic's playbook laid bare. Dad. Tyler said, his voice urgent. We have to tell Bryn. We have to tell her today. Not yet, I said, looking up with red eyes. If she's already under his spell, or if she's become his partner out of fear, she'll warn him. We need to know exactly what she knows before we move. Lucas, can you get into his digital footprint? I want his emails. I'll try. Lucas said, his fingers already hovering over the keyboard. Give me 48 hours. If he's talking to a silent partner or moving that offshore money, I'll find the trail. I stood up, looking at the empty laptop screen. The man who was about to join our family was a ghost who left nothing but ruined lives in his wake. But he had never met a father who had already lost everything once. The desert sun was blinding, but inside my study, the world had gone cold. It was 10 a.m. on November 1st. Lucas Mercer had arrived through the side garage entrance, slipping into the house like a phantom. He sat across from me now, his face a mask of grim professional focus, as he pulled a black USB drive from his pocket and slotted it into his laptop. I got into his personal correspondence, Preston. Lucas said, his voice low as he leaned forward to close the heavy velvet blinds. I used a contact in cyber forensics. It's a legal gray area, but if this ever reaches a courtroom, we'll mark it as an anonymous tip. You need to see the architecture of this lie. He turned the screen toward me. The inbox for dvale.consulting was a graveyard of ruined lives, but 4 specific emails stood out dated over the last 14 months. Email 1, September 15th, 2022. Subject B, assessment. It was a memo Dominic had written to himself. It read like a lab report on a specimen. Subject Bryn Caldwell, 28. Executive Director. Foundation assets, $87 million. Father Preston Caldwell, net worth estimated $60 million plus. Target Family Trust, $12 million. B has a severe gambling addiction, online poker, and high-stakes sports betting, discovered during initial therapy sessions on August 28th. Current debt, $680,000 to offshore sites and local sharks. B is desperate, ashamed, and terrified of her father finding out. Perfect leverage. Plan, encourage additional losses, then offer the solution via the trust. Timeline 12 to 18 months to marriage, then extraction. My hands began to shake so violently I had to grip the edge of the mahogany desk. He knew, I whispered. He didn't try to help her. He weaponized her sickness. Email 2, February 3rd, 2023 to rc@securevault.ch. Dominic was writing to an offshore associate. Phase 2 confirmed. Trust is $12 million liquid. B now owes $1. $1 million after I introduced her to platinum-tier sites. She's completely hooked. She believes a foundation audit will expose her. I've positioned myself as the only savior. She thinks we're partners. Plan, convince father to release trust funds as an emergency loan, transfer offshore, and disappear. B is fully committed. Timeline extraction, December 10th. Exit strategy frame B for total embezzlement. Anonymous federal tip on December 12th. I disappear December 13th. B takes the fall. Her accounts, her signatures. Clean. Tyler, reading over my shoulder, let out a breath that sounded like a sob. She's not just a victim, Dad, he whispered. She's an accomplice. She's helping him rob you. Email 3, October 20th, 2023. From Bryn's personal Gmail, this one hit the hardest. It was sent just days before the engagement party. D, I can't sleep. I keep thinking about what we're doing to my dad. He's going to be devastated. But you're right, if I don't do this, I'll go to prison for the $1.85 million. If we pull this off, we can pay him back eventually, right? Once we're in Barcelona, we can start fresh. I trust you. I love you. I just wish there was another way. But there isn't. I'll talk to Dad next week about the audit crisis. He always believes me. I hate myself for this. But I hate the idea of losing you more. B. Tears blurred my vision, splashing onto the keyboard. My daughter, I choked out. She's planning to destroy me, and she thinks he's going to take her to Barcelona. Vertuntenin, Lucas said softly. There's one more. You need to see how the partnership ends. Email 4, October 21st, 2023. Subject Endgame, Dominic's final play, sent to his offshore contact. B is getting nervous. I reassured her, but I'm pushing the timeline. She'll approach her father between November 5th and 10th. Once the $6.5 million transfer from the trust is complete, I execute the exit. Step 1, transfer funds to a secondary account B cannot access. Step 2, send anonymous email to Federal Field Office regarding B's forged trust documents. All evidence points to her. Step 3, disappear December 13th with my alternate identity. B, will be arrested within 72 hours. Her own emails to me show intent. I've archived everything for the feds to find. Estimated sentence 15 to 20 years. By the time she realizes I set her up, I'll be in Southeast Asia. No loose ends. D. The silence in the study was deafening. The ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway sounded like a countdown to an execution. My daughter was walking straight into a trap, convinced she was escaping one. He's going to destroy her. My voice was hollow, stripped of all emotion. He's going to take the money and leave her to rot in a federal cell for 2 decades. And she has no idea. Tyler slammed his fist against the wall. Dad, we have to show her this. Right now. If she sees what he's really planning, she'll have to wake up. I looked at the screen at the cold, calculating words of the man my daughter loved. She'll break Tyler. This will shatter her soul. I stood up, the CFO in me dead replaced, only by the father who had already buried his wife. But she's still my little girl. I'll be damned if I let that monster use her and throw her away like trash. So what's the play? Lucas asked, already closing his laptop. Now, we don't wait for him to move, I said, my eyes turning to steel. We bring Bryn here. We show her the truth, and then we give her one chance to choose the man who is selling her life for a bank account, or the family that will crawl through hell to save her. The desert air outside was cool, but inside the formal living room of the Caldwell estate, the atmosphere was freezing. It was 7:30 p.m. on November 2nd. I had called Bryn an hour earlier, my voice a forced anchor of stability. She had arrived looking like a ghost of herself. No makeup, a simple sundress hidden under a heavy cardigan, and eyes that moved with the twitchy energy of someone looking for a trap. Sit down, sweetheart, I said, gesturing to the leather couch. We rarely used this room. The fireplace was cold, and the air smelled of lemon polish and old money. Bryn sat, her hands trembling in her lap. Dad, what's going on? You're scaring me. Why couldn't Dominic come? Is this about the wedding budget? I sat across from her, placed my iPad on the coffee table, and looked her in the eye. I didn't see the executive director of a multi-million-dollar foundation. I saw my little girl drowning. Pakachantra. Bryn. I know about the gambling. I started, my voice steady but cracking at the edges. I know about the $1.85 million you took from your mother's foundation, and I know you and Dominic are planning to take $6.5 million more from the family trust. The color drained from Bryn's face so fast it was like a physical blow. She froze, her mouth opening, but no sound coming out. Tyler got a financial crimes alert 3 days after your engagement party. I continued, pushing through the pain. We've been investigating. We hired a private investigator. I know everything, Bryn. She stood up abruptly, her breathing coming in jagged gasps. Dad, I can explain. It's not what you think. Dominic and I, we have a plan. We're going to pay it back. He's helping me fix it. He's the only one who didn't judge me. Stop, I said, raising my hand. Bryn, I need you to listen. Sit down. She sank back onto the leather, tears finally breaking through. I'm not here to yell at you, I said, my voice softening. I'm here to save your life. Because Dominic Vale doesn't love you. He never did. He's a professional predator, and if you don't believe your father, I'm going to show you the proof. I pushed the iPad toward her. The screen was pulled up to the email from October 21st, the one titled Endgame. She read it, I commanded. All of it. Bryn picked up the device with shaking hands. I watched her face as she read. I watched the confusion shift to disbelief, then to a cold, sharp horror as she reached the part where Dominic detailed his plan to frame her and flee to Southeast Asia while she served 20 years in federal prison. The iPad hit the floor with a thud. Bryn stood up, pacing the rug, hyperventilating. No, this isn't real. You faked this. You've always hated him because he's not a finance guy. I didn't fake it, honey, I said, standing to meet her. Lucas Mercer pulled it directly from his account. It's real. He's already archived your emails to him, to give to the FBI the moment he secures the trust funds. He's not taking you to Barcelona, Bryn. He's taking your money and leaving you to rot in a cell. You're lying, she screamed, her voice echoing off the high ceilings. He wouldn't. He can't. Her knees gave out. She collapsed onto the rug, sobbing uncontrollably, the sound raw and guttural. I knelt beside her, pulling her into my arms. I'm sorry, baby. I'm so sorry. But you have to see the truth. He found your weakness, and he turned it into a leash. He's going to destroy you unless you help us stop him. I thought he was the only one who loved the real me. She sobbed into my shoulder. I thought we were starting over. Oh God, Dad. What have I done? What have I done? The door to the study opened, and Tyler stepped out. He hadn't been able to watch from the shadows anymore. He knelt on the other side of her, his hand on her arm. Bryn, look at me. She looked up, her face, a mask of wet hair and streaked mascara. I'm a detective. Tyler said, his voice firm but compassionate. I've seen guys like Dominic. They don't feel love, they feel opportunity. You weren't his partner, you were his access point. But you're not a monster, Bryn. You're sick. You have an addiction, and he weaponized it against your own family. It's not too late to choose the right side. I stole from Mom's foundation, she whispered, her voice broken. I was going to steal from you. I'm a criminal. Yes, I said, holding her tighter. But you can also be a survivor. Help us catch him, testify. Show the prosecutor that when the mask fell, you chose your family. It won't erase the past, but it will show you're trying to make it right. There was a long, agonizing silence punctuated only by Bryn's ragged breathing. Finally, she looked at both of us, her eyes red but suddenly clear. What do you need me to do? She whispered. I pulled her close, feeling the weight of the war ahead. First, we're going to get you a lawyer who specializes in federal cooperation, I said. Then we're going to set a trap. And you're going to help us make sure Dominic Vale never hurts anyone ever again. Bryn nodded, still crying, but her jaw was set with a newfound resolution. Tyler reached over and squeezed her hand. Welcome back, sis, he said. The morning sun of November 3rd hit the glass windows of Rebecca Strand's law office, but the warmth didn't reach us inside. It was 9 a.m. Bryn sat hunched in a gray hoodie, her oversized sunglasses still on, though her hands shook so much she had to hide them under the mahogany table. Rebecca, a veteran defense attorney with a reputation for ironclad pragmatism, pushed a box of tissues toward my daughter and took a slow sip of her coffee. Shirin, I'm glad you're here. Rebecca started, her voice calm but devoid of false comfort. What you're about to do takes immense courage, but as your counsel, I need to be brutally clear about your legal reality. She laid out a series of document statutes from the U.S. Code. If the Department of Justice moves forward without your cooperation, you are looking at multiple federal charges: wire fraud, 18 U.S.C. 1343, theft from a program receiving federal funds, 18 U.S.C. 666, and conspiracy, 18 U.S.C. 371. Given the amount, over $1.8 million, the federal sentencing guidelines suggest 12 to 20 years in a federal facility. You would lose your license in nonprofit management and be permanently barred from handling charitable funds. The room went silent, save for Bryn's ragged breathing. I'm going to prison, she whispered, a single tear escaping from under her glasses. Yes, Rebecca said firmly. But the difference between 2 years and 20 years depends entirely on what you do in the next 72 hours. I've been in contact with the U.S. Attorney's Office in Phoenix. They've agreed to proffer an agreement to hold off on an arrest warrant if you deliver Dominic Vale on a silver platter. If we succeed, we can negotiate a plea deal, perhaps 18 to 36 months, reduced further for good behavior, followed by 5 years of probation and mandatory addiction treatment. But we have a deadline. If there is no progress by November 8th, they move forward with your warrant. Tyler stood up and pulled a whiteboard into the center of the room. Here's the sting operation, he said, drawing a diagram of a controlled setting. Well, we need 3 things. 1, a recorded confession from Dominic admitting he planned to frame you. 2, proof of his intent to steal the trust money. 3, his admission that he manipulated your addiction as leverage. No. We have to move before November 10th. I added, remembering the timeline in Dominic's intercepted emails. He expects the trust funds to be released by then. The plan was high risk. Bryn would have to meet Dominic at a private location somewhere he felt safe enough to brag, like his clinic or his apartment. You have to act normal, Rebecca instructed Bryn. Set up a meeting for November 5th or 6th. Tell him Dad finally agreed to sign the trust release forms, and you need to go over the logistics of moving the money offshore. During the meeting, you will elicit a confession. Ask him, what happens if Dad finds out? What's the plan if the FBI investigates? We need him to confirm the endgame on tape. What if he suspects me? Bryn's voice was small, terrified. What if he hurts me? I'll be right outside, Tyler promised, leaning down to meet her eyes. Unmarked car, full surveillance team. We'll be 30 seconds away. He won't have a chance to touch you. At 10:30 a.m., Detective Olivia Grant from the Scottsdale PD's Financial Crimes Unit arrived. She was a colleague of Tyler's, a no-nonsense investigator who specialized in undercover tech. She opened a small plastic case containing a covert wire kit, a microphone no larger than a grain of rice, and a transmitter the size of a credit card. We can hide this in your waistband or your bra, Bryn, Detective Grant explained. The tech is military grade. We'll hear every heartbeat in real time. If at any point you feel unsafe, you use the safe word. Let's use Barcelona. If you say that we come through the doors immediately. Understood. Bryn nodded slowly, her face pale as ash. I'll text him tonight, she said, her voice gaining a sliver of steel. I'll tell him Dad signed the forms, and we need to finalize the timeline. After the meeting, the others left the room to give us a moment. I looked at my daughter, so small in that oversized hoodie, and my heart broke. You don't have to do this, Bryn, I said softly. I can take the financial loss. We can go to the FBI right now, and you can plead guilty without the risk of facing him. Bryn wiped her eyes and looked up at me. For the first time in months, the gambler's haze was gone. No, Dad. I need to do this. I need to face him. I need to hear him say it, that he never loved me. Because a part of me still wants to believe the lie. If I don't hear the truth from his own mouth, I'll never forgive myself for what I almost did to you. I pulled her into a hug, holding her tight, as if she were still 6 years old. Then let's end this, I whispered. Together, the shadows in Bryn's childhood bedroom felt longer than usual. It was 8:00 p.m. on November 3rd. For the past 48 hours, she had been staying at my house, telling Dominic she needed space to decompress from wedding stress. In reality, she was living in a tactical bubble. Bryn sat on the edge of her bed, the same one where she used to read fairy tales, staring at her phone with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. Tyler sat beside her, his voice a low, steady anchor. You've got this, sis. Just act like the girl he thinks he's already bought and sold. Excited. Eager. Ready for the win. Bryn took a jagged breath and typed. Bryn, 8:03 p.m. Hey, babe. Can we meet tomorrow night? Just us. I have amazing news about Dad. 2 minutes crawled by like hours. Then the phone buzzed. Dominic, 8:05 p.m. Of course. What's the news? Can you tell me now? Bryn looked at Tyler. He gave a sharp nod. Hook him. Make him feel the money is within reach. Bryn, 8:06 p.m. I'd rather tell you in person, but let's just say Dad came around much faster than we thought. Can you meet me at your clinic around 7 p.m. tomorrow, November 4th? I'll bring dinner and we can celebrate properly. Dominic, 8:07 p.m. You're killing me with the suspense, but okay. Clinic at 7. I'll clear my schedule. I love you, B. This is really happening. Bryn, 8:09 p.m. I love you too. See you tomorrow. The moment the last message sent, Bryn dropped the phone as if it had burned her and broke into silent, racking sobs. Tyler pulled her into a hug. You did great. Just one more day, and this ghost is out of our lives. November 4th, 2023. The morning was a blur of technical precision. At 9 a.m., we were at the Scottsdale PD in Detective Grant's office. She showed Bryn the device, a Bluetooth transmitter no larger than a thumb drive. It was taped to the small of Bryn's back with a microphone thread as thin as fishing line woven into the lace of her bra. It's crystal clear, Grant said after a sound check. When you walk in, greet him normally. Sit close, the mic works best within 6 feet. Your job is to be the audience. Men like Dominic are narcissists. They love to brag when they think they've won. Let him tell you how smart he is. By 11 a.m., we moved to Rebecca's office for script rehearsals. Tyler and Rebecca grilled Bryn, helping her steady her voice. So Dad signed the release forms yesterday. The trust funds will transfer to our joint account by November 10th. What's our timeline after that? I keep thinking, what if Dad somehow finds out later? What's our story? Will anyone be able to trace the foundation money back to me? Bryn practiced until the tremors in her voice vanished, replaced by a cold, hollow determination. At 3 p.m., the surveillance team scoped the location, Dominic's clinic in Old Town Scottsdale Suite 204. It was a second-floor office with a private entrance, perfect for Dominic to feel safe and perfect for us to box him in. Tyler and Detective Grant would be in an unmarked van 40 feet away, listening in real time. 2 other officers were already positioned in the adjacent suite, the wall between them thin enough to hear a raised voice. If you say Barcelona, we breach, Grant reminded her. 10 seconds or less. At 6 p.m. back at the house, Bryn dressed in a simple blouse and jeans. I held her hands, finding them cold but still. If at any point you want to stop, you say the word. Your safety is worth more than any confession. I won't stop, Dad, she said, looking me in the eye with a clarity I hadn't seen in years. I owe you this. I owe Mom's foundation, and I owe myself the truth. I kissed her forehead, my heart heavy with a father's pride and a father's fear. I'll be in the van with Tyler. You won't be alone for a second. 6:45 p.m. Bryn pulled her car into the clinic parking lot. Tyler was 3 cars behind her in the shadows. I sat in the back of the surveillance van headsets, on listening to the rhythmic sound of Bryn's breathing through the wire. She sent one last text to my phone. I'm ready. I replied instantly. We're here. You've got this. Bryn stepped out of the car, walked up the stairs, and knocked on the door of Suite 204. The door opened. I heard the familiar, polished voice of the man I now loathed. Hey, beautiful. Dominic said, the sound of a wine cork popping, echoing through the transmitter. Come in. The trap was set. Now we just had to wait for the predator to speak. The air in Suite 204 was thick with the scent of expensive vanilla candles and the smooth, deceptive notes of jazz. It was 7:02 p.m. Dominic stood there in the dim light, looking every bit the successful psychologist navy shirt unbuttoned at the collar. Barefoot, a relaxed smile on his face. He pulled Bryn into a hug, kissing her forehead, with a possessive tenderness that made my skin crawl through the headset. Hey, beautiful, he whispered. I've been dying to hear your news. Come sit. Inside the surveillance van parked 40 feet away, the silence was absolute. Tyler's eyes were locked on the audio levels, his jaw set so tight I could see the muscles pulsing. Detective Grant signaled the team in the adjacent suite. "Stand by," she breathed. I gripped my knees, my daughter's heartbeat thumping rhythmically in my ears through the wire. Bryn played her part perfectly. She sat on the leather couch, letting Dominic drape an arm around her shoulders. She looked excited, her voice breathless in a way that mimicked genuine joy. "I talked to Dad yesterday," she started. "I did exactly what you said. I told him the foundation auditors found discrepancies and the board was panicking. I told him if we didn't show financial stability fast, they'd go public with an investigation." Dominic tensed slightly, his fingers pausing as they played with her hair. "And he was upset, asked a million questions, but I stayed calm. I told him we needed proof of liquidity within 30 days. Dominic, he said he'd help. He's meeting Rebecca on Monday to sign the trust release forms. $6.5 million transferred to a bridge account." Dominic stood up so fast he nearly knocked over the wine. He pulled Bryn to her feet, laughing as he swung her around. "You did it. You actually did it. Oh my God, Bryn, I'm so proud of you." He held her face, kissing her deeply. "Of course he believed you. You're his daughter. He trusts you more than anyone." I saw a flicker of something dark in his eyes through the remote camera feed, a predator seeing the cage door open. He poured 2 glasses of wine, the silver clink echoing in my headset. "To us, to the future, to Barcelona." Dominic sat back down, pulling Bryn close. He was leaning in now, his eyes bright with the fever of a man who could already smell the money. "In 2 weeks, babe, we're going to be free. Walk me through it again," Bryn said, acting eager. "I want to picture everything." Dominic loved talking about the plan. It was his masterpiece. "Monday, November 6th, your dad signs. By Thursday, the 6.5 million hits the Saguaro Wellness LLC account. Then, on Friday the 10th, I transfer it to a secondary holding account I set up in the Cayman Islands. No U.S. reporting, totally private. We let it sit there for 48 hours to make sure no flags pop up. Then Monday the 13th, we wire it to our personal accounts in Barcelona." "Why the Caymans?" Bryn asked, acting confused. "Why not just send it straight?" "Because of the layers, Bryn," he said, his voice patient as if explaining to a child. "Arizona Trust to Saguaro LLC to Cayman to Barcelona. Each hop makes it harder to follow. By the time anyone realizes the money is gone, we're untouchable. We fly out November 14th, 10 p.m. 30 hours later, we're sipping sangria on La Rambla." He painted a picture of a life in El Gótico cobblestone streets, balconies overlooking plazas, real estate investments, and passive income. "We'll send your dad an email after we land, something vague. By the time he processes it, we'll be ghosts." In the van, my breath hitched. He was talking about disappearing my daughter as if she were a piece of luggage he intended to lose. "Do you think we'll ever be able to come back?" Bryn asked softly. Dominic shook his head. "Honestly, probably not for 10 or 15 years. But who cares? We'll have each other. If you stay, you go to prison for the foundation money. If you come with me, you're free. It's the only choice, Bryn." "He's good," Tyler whispered in the van. "But we need a confession of criminal intent, not just a travel itinerary." Bryn took a tiny sip of wine, then leaned back looking thoughtful. "Hey, can I ask you something random?" "Of course." "Last week I saw a name on an old contract in your home office. Monica Graves, Northwest Regional Fund. I didn't think much of it, but then today I got this weird message on social media from a lawyer. They told me to ask you about what happened in Portland. Then they deleted it." The shift in the room was instantaneous. Dominic sat up straighter, his arm sliding off her shoulder. His body language went from lover to hunter in a heartbeat. What kind of message? It freaked me out, so I Googled it. Bryn said, her voice innocent but probing. I found articles from 2021 about a dispute over fund transfers. Dominic, what happened? I want to make sure I know everything before we leave the country. No surprises. Dominic's jaw clenched. He tried to smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. Bryn, that was a misunderstanding with a former client. It was resolved years ago. But the articles said something about a lawsuit. I just want to be sure, babe. Dominic stood up and walked to the window, his back to her. For 10 long seconds, the only sound was the jazz music. When he turned back around, the warmth was gone. His face was cold, calculating, and dangerous. Bryn, how much do you actually know about Monica? Nothing, she said, her voice shaking with a fear that wasn't entirely acted. Just the message. Why should I know more? Dominic walked back and sat on the edge of the coffee table, inches from her face. His eyes locked onto hers with a terrifying intensity. If we're going to do this, if we're going to build a life together, you need to understand something. My past is complicated. I've made enemies. People who didn't appreciate my methods. Monica Graves is one of them. And if someone is trying to poison you against me, we have a problem. What, Dominic, you're scaring me, Bryn whispered. What happened with Monica? Dominic leaned forward, his voice dropping to a low, menacing crawl. I'm going to tell you the truth. Because I love you. And because if we're partners, you deserve to know. In the van, Detective Grant gripped her radio. This is it. Get ready. I know the $1.85 million figure has shocked many people. But what comes next will show you that this amount is just the tip of the iceberg. If you're still watching, please comment 1. 85 inches, so I know you're still here. And I need to be clear, this story includes fictional plot elements to enhance the experience and educational value. If this makes you uncomfortable, you can turn off the video right now. The smooth, rhythmic pulse of jazz filled the penthouse, a hauntingly elegant backdrop to the predatory coldness emanating from Dominic Vale. It was 7:25 p.m. The candlelight flickered, casting long, distorted shadows against the walls. Dominic sat on the edge of the mahogany coffee table, leaning into Bryn's personal space. His eyes weren't those of a lover anymore. They were the calculated, clinical eyes of a surgeon about to perform a dissection. I'm going to tell you the truth, Bryn, he said, his voice dropping to a low, rhythmic crawl that made the hair on her neck stand up. Because if we're going to be partners, real partners, you deserve to understand how the world actually works. It isn't about right or wrong. It's about who holds the pen when the story is written. In the surveillance van parked 3 blocks away, the atmosphere was suffocating. Preston leaned so far forward, his forehead pressed against the cold glass of the monitor, his knuckles white as he gripped the desk. Tyler raised a hand, a silent command for the tactical team in the staging room to hold their breath. Wait, Tyler whispered, his eyes locked on the waveform of Dominic's voice. You let him build his own gallows. Let him hang himself with his own words. Dominic exhaled a long, weary breath, rubbing his face as if the weight of his honesty was a burden he was magnanimously sharing. Monica Graves, Portland, 2021. You saw the headlines, didn't you? She was the executive director of a mental health nonprofit with a $12 million budget. They brought me in to restructure, to save them from their own incompetence. Monica was struggling, Bryn. She was burning out, drinking too much in her office. She confided in me, but then she panicked. She moved $420,000 to an offshore account. She called it an investment, but we both know it was a desperate grab before the board could fire her. But the news, the lawsuit said you were the one who orchestrated it. Bryn prompted, her voice a fragile whisper, perfectly playing the role of the confused, devoted fiancé. Dominic's face twisted into a sneer of pure contempt. Because she needed a scapegoat. When the board found the hole in the books, she pointed at me. She claimed I manipulated her, used my psychological expertise to confuse her. Total bullshit. I had no signing authority. It was her account, her password, her finger on the send button. But my lawyer said a public fight would stain my reputation forever. So I paid her $80,000 to sign an NDA and disappear. It was extortion, Bryn. But in this world, sometimes you pay the tax on other people's stupidity. He reached out, taking Bryn's cold hands in his. Sometimes the people I try to help turn on me when their own mistakes catch up to them. Monica was one. There was another in Denver back in 2018. It's always the same pattern. I do my job. They make a series of catastrophic choices, and then they cry victim to save their own skins. 3 different people in 3 different cities accused you of the exact same thing, Bryn asked, slowly pulling her hands back as if chilled. Dominic, to an outsider that sounds exactly like a pattern. It's not a pattern. It's bad luck and weak people. Dominic snapped, suddenly pacing the room, his polished exterior beginning to crack. Like, I work with nonprofits groups full of well-meaning amateurs who are way over their heads. When the ship starts sinking, they need a villain, and I'm the easy target because I'm the outsider. Bryn stood up, her breath hitching in a calculated wave of panic. But what if the FBI comes for our foundation? What if they look at the money I moved, and then they look at you and find Monica? They'll link us, Dominic. They'll see the connection. Dominic stopped pacing. He grabbed her shoulders, not with heat, but with a firm, silencing grip that felt like a vice. Bryn, look at me. Listen carefully. If the FBI investigates, they will investigate you. They will never find me. Bryn froze, her eyes wide. What do you mean? Dominic let go and stepped back, smoothing his hair, deciding it was time to drop the final curtain. He believed she was too deep in the mire to ever climb out. Let's look at the ledger, Bryn. Be logical. When the feds open an audit, here is what they'll find. Your name is on every offshore account. Your personal login was used for every wire transfer. Your signature is on every fake invoice we sent to the vendors. Your personal bank account received that $180,000 bonus in October. They have your travel records to every gambling city on the map. What they will not find is my name on a single scrap of paper. I'm not on the board. I'm not a signer. To the world, I'm just the supportive fiancé who attended a few charity galas. So, it all points to me. Bryn whispered, the horror in her voice now very, very real. Dominic nodded with a thin, sympathetic smile that didn't reach his predatory eyes. Yes. We designed it that way from day one, Bryn. It's called operational security. If anything goes sideways, the trail ends at your door. That's not me being cruel, it's me being a professional. Because if they catch you, I stay free to hire the best lawyers money can buy. If they catch me, I can't help you from a prison cell. You're saying, I take the fall and you just walk away? I'm saying you take the initial heat. Dominic corrected his tone, turning ice cold. And if we don't make it to Barcelona, then you stick to the script. You tell them you acted alone because of your gambling addiction, which is a documented fact. You say you stole the money to cover your debts, which is also true. You say I only found out later and tried to help you fix it out of love. You might do 3 to 5 years in a minimum security facility, and I'll be out here keeping the rest of the money safe waiting for you. 3 to 5 years. Bryn's voice was a ghost. And you, what happens to your grief if I'm arrested? Dominic sat back down casual, as if discussing a business merger. I'd play the part of the heartbroken fiancé who had no idea his bride-to-be was a master manipulator. I'm a victim in this, Bryn, just like your father. In the surveillance van, Tyler's voice was a low, terrifying growl. There it is, the full confession of the frame-up. Grant, take the monster down. Bryn wiped her face, staring at Dominic, as the final veil of her life fell away. You've thought through every single detail of how to ruin me. You were never going to wait for me. You were going to take the 6.5 million and let me rot in a cell just like you did to Monica. Just like Denver. Dominic's face hardened into a mask of stone. The loving fiancé was gone. Bryn, where is this hysterical nonsense coming from? My father hired his own investigators. Dominic Bryn screamed, the acting finally snapping into a raw, genuine fury. He found your real emails. He knows about the plan to report me to the FBI the second your plane touches down in Southeast Asia. He knows everything. Dominic's eyes turned black with a predatory instinct. He realized the silence of the penthouse wasn't peace, it was a trap. You're wearing a wire. Barcelona, Bryn whispered. Go, go, go! Tyler's voice exploded over the radio. Dominic lunged, a snarl escaping his lips as he reached for Bryn's shirt, his fingers clawing to rip the microphone from her skin. But he never reached her. The reinforced oak door of the suite exploded inwards with the deafening crash of a battering ram. Police federal agents, hands up. Tyler was the first man through the breach, his momentum carrying him across the room like a freight train. He tackled Dominic to the floor, the sound of the impact echoing through the suite. Officers flooded the room, their tactical lights cutting through the candlelight, shattering the deception. Preston ran in from the hallway, ignoring the officers shouting for him to stay back. He saw Bryn stumbling into the arms of a detective, her body racked with violent sobs. The officers hauled a cursing, struggling Dominic up from the carpet. His expensive suit was torn, his hair matted, his polished mask completely destroyed. She's lying. Dominic shrieked, his voice thin and desperate. She's a thief. She's a gambling addict. Check the wire, she admitted to everything. Tyler kept a firm hand on Dominic's neck as he ratcheted the steel cuffs onto his wrists. Dominic Vale, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit wire fraud, attempted grand theft, and witness tampering. We've been listening for the last 20 minutes, you pathetic coward. We have it all. Preston reached Bryn, pulling her into a crushing embrace. She buried her face in his chest, the weight of a year's worth of fear and lies finally breaking. As the officers dragged Dominic toward the door, he stopped looking at Preston with pure, unadulterated venom. She's not a victim, Preston. She's just like me. She's a thief who got caught. Preston looked Dominic in the eye, his voice as cold as the desert night. You're right. She made terrible choices. She let a monster into our home. But you want to know the difference between my daughter and a parasite like you. She chose to stop. She chose the truth. You never would have. The suite fell silent as they dragged Dominic away, leaving only the sound of a father holding his daughter in the quiet, broken aftermath of the storm. The fluorescent lights of the Scottsdale Police Department interview room were hummed with a sterile, unforgiving energy. It was 9:30 p.m. on November 4th. Bryn sat at the metal table, her hands wrapped around a paper cup of lukewarm water. She wasn't in cuffs, a small courtesy for her status as a cooperating witness. But the weight of the situation was heavier than any iron. Rebecca Strand sat to her left, while across from them was Assistant U.S. Attorney Jennifer Cow, a woman whose sharp eyes and crisp suit signaled she had no room for fairy tales. In a nearby observation room, Tyler and I watched through the one-way glass, our headsets bringing every whisper into sharp relief. Bryn, you understand that by speaking with us tonight, you are waiving your right to remain silent, correct? AUSA Cow asked, her voice like a scalpel. Yes. Bryn said, her voice small but clear. I want to tell you everything. For the next 90 minutes, the ghost of the last 2 years was finally dragged into the light. Bryn detailed how a casual interest in online poker in August 2021 had spiraled into a nightmare of offshore sports betting. By August 2022, she was $680,000 in debt to sites that didn't care about her last name. Loan sharks had begun calling her personal line, making vague, terrifying threats against her safety. That was when she met Dominic Vale. She had sought him out for therapy to fix her addiction, thinking their sessions were confidential. She didn't realize he was recording her building a portfolio of her secrets. By September 2022, Dominic stopped being her therapist and started being her partner. He offered a solution: use her position at the foundation to access my wealth, pay off her debts, and eventually disappear together to a life of luxury. I systematically embezzled $1.85 million from my mother's legacy. Bryn confessed, her head bowing in shame. I used fake invoices and offshore wires. Dominic handled the logistics. I provided the signatures. And then last month he pressured me to move faster. He wanted the $6.5 million from the family trust. I agreed because I believed he loved me. I thought Barcelona was our fresh start. I didn't know I was just his fall girl until my father showed me the emails. A USA cow tapped her pen. And the wire recording tonight. That was your choice. Yes, I wanted to stop him, and I wanted to take responsibility for what I've done. The room went silent as Cow looked at Rebecca. Your client's cooperation is highly valuable. The recording she secured tonight gives us an airtight case against Vale, the intent to frame the prior bad acts, the pattern of fraud. With Bryn's testimony, we can put him away for 15 to 20 years. Without it, the case is significantly harder. So what is the offer? Rebecca asked. I'd 1 count of wire fraud and 1 count of theft from an organization receiving federal funds, Cow stated. Our sentencing recommendation will be 18 months in a federal facility, reduced from 24 due to substantial cooperation. She'll have 5 years of supervised release, full restitution of the $1.85 million and 800 hours of community service. She'll also be required to complete a mandatory gambling addiction treatment program. And if she doesn't take the deal, then we prosecute to the full extent of the law, Cow said flatly. She'd be looking at 8 to 12 years, realistically. And you can bet Dominic's defense will paint her as the mastermind who manipulated him. Without a cooperation deal, she has no credibility. Bryn looked at Rebecca, then at the camera lens, as if she knew I was watching. Take the deal. I deserve it. I want to make sure Dominic goes away longer than I do. He will, Cow assured her. We're exploring RICO charges for a pattern of racketeering. Between Portland, Denver, and your case, plus his fake credentials, he's looking at 18 to 25 years. November 5th, 2023, 1:30 a.m. The drive home was silent. Bryn sat in the passenger seat of my SUV, staring out at the passing streetlights of Paradise Valley. The black ankle monitor was hidden beneath her jeans, a constant reminder that she was now under house arrest until her sentencing hearing on December 15th. Inside the house, I made a pot of chamomile tea. We sat at the kitchen table, the same place where Sarah used to help her with her homework. I'm so sorry, Dad, Bryn whispered into her mug. I destroyed everything. The foundation, your trust, Mom's memory. I reached across the table and held her hand. Her skin was ice cold. You made terrible choices, Bryn. Selfish, destructive choices. But you also made one very brave choice tonight. And that is the one I'm going to choose to remember. I'm going to prison, Dad, for 1.5 years. And I know, I said, my voice thick with emotion. And I will visit you every single month. We'll use that time to get you the help you need. And when you get out, we will rebuild. Not the foundation, but our family. Together. Bryn finally broke the tears streaming down her face. How can you not hate me? Because you're my daughter, I said, pulling her into a hug. And because your mother would want me to fight for you even when you couldn't find the strength to fight for yourself. The nightmare is over, sweetheart. Now we just have to walk the long road back. The courtroom was a sea of dark suits and camera lenses on November 15th, 2023. This was the moment the Scottsdale psychologist multi-state charity fraud scheme moved from a private nightmare to a national headline. I sat in the gallery with Tyler and Rebecca, my hands resting on my knees, watching as Dominic Vale was led in. He looked thinner, his polished facade replaced by an orange jumpsuit and a coarse, unkempt beard. His eyes, however, remained as cold and calculative as ever. Bryn wasn't there. She was at home, tethered by her ankle monitor, watching the live stream of the arraignment that would decide the fate of the man who had almost destroyed her. The magistrate judge read the charges with a rhythmic, chilling precision: 7 counts of wire fraud, 18 U.S.C. 1343, involving Monica Graves in Portland, Bryn Caldwell in Scottsdale, and 2 newly discovered victims in Denver. 3 counts of theft from organizations receiving federal funds, and a litany of identity fraud and conspiracy charges. The prosecution had even added RICO predicate acts, painting a pattern of racketeering that spanned 7 years. "Mr. Vale, how do you plead?" the judge asked. Dominic stared straight ahead. "Not guilty. A USA." Jennifer Cow immediately moved for remand. "Your Honor, the defendant is a significant flight risk. He had one-way tickets to Barcelona, a fake passport, and millions in offshore accounts. This isn't a lapse in judgment. It's a career in deception." Bail was denied. As the bailiffs led Dominic away, he glanced at me in the gallery, a final defiant smirk that told me he regretted nothing. 1 month later, the mood in the same courthouse was somber, almost quiet. Bryn stood before the bench in a navy suit, her hair pulled back tightly. She looked fragile but focused. She had spent the last month writing a 5-page letter of apology to the foundation board, the donors, and to the memory of her mother. "Ms. Caldwell," the judge said, looking over his spectacles, "you held a position of immense trust. You managed a legacy dedicated to mental health, and you betrayed it. You conspired to steal from your own blood. Do you understand the gravity of your actions?" "Yes, Your Honor." Bryn's voice was steady, though her eyes were wet. "I betrayed my family, my mother's name, and the people we were supposed to help. My addiction is an explanation, but it is not an excuse. I made conscious choices to lie and steal from the person who loved me most. I accept full responsibility, and I am committed to making amends, starting with whatever sentence you deem fit." The judge noted her extraordinary cooperation, which would be instrumental in convicting Vale. Then came the hammer. "I hereby sentence you to 18 months in federal prison, followed by 5 years of supervised release. You will pay $1.85 million in restitution to the Caldwell Family Foundation. You are ordered to report to FCY Dublin in California by January 1st, 2024. When the hearing adjourned, the bailiffs allowed us 2 minutes. I held her tight. 18 months, Bryn. You can do this. I'll be there every step of the way. I'll write every week, Dad," she whispered. "I promise." The trial of Dominic Vale lasted 3 weeks in the spring of 2024. Monica Graves traveled from Portland to testify, her voice shaking but brave as she described his psychological manipulation. But the turning point was Bryn. She sat on that stand for 2 days, detailing every wire transfer and every lie. The recording of the Barcelona safe word meeting was played for the jury, Dominic's own voice echoing through the room, cold and incriminating. His defense tried to paint Bryn as a manipulative addict, framing a brilliant man to save herself. But the evidence, the endgame emails, the fake PhD credentials, and the trail of broken lives in Denver was insurmountable. On March 28, 2024, the verdict came back guilty on all counts. At his sentencing, the judge didn't hold back. "Dominic Vale, you are a predator. You fabricated a life and a career to exploit the vulnerable. You showed zero remorse even as your victims sat feet away from you. This court finds you a danger to society. The sentence was 240 months, 20 years in federal prison, with a lifetime ban from any nonprofit consulting and a restitution order of $2.8 million. Dominic didn't flinch. He was led out in silence, a ghost of the man who had tried to build a kingdom on stolen lives. As Tyler and I walked out of the courthouse, a swarm of reporters met us at the steps. "Mr. Caldwell, how do you feel about the 20-year sentence?" I stopped and looked directly into the camera lens. "I feel relieved that a dangerous man is off the streets," I said, my voice carrying across the plaza. "I feel heartbroken for my daughter, who is currently paying the price for her mistakes. And I feel grateful to the investigators, the prosecutors, and especially to my son, who made sure justice was served." That's all I have to say. I turned and walked away, Tyler's hand on my shoulder. For the first time in years, the air in Phoenix felt clean. He drive from the familiar red rocks of Scottsdale to Northern California was 5 hours of a heavy, suffocating silence. It wasn't the kind of silence that comes from having nothing to say, but the kind that comes when everything has already been shattered. On January 1st, 2024, the landscape outside the SUV window shifted from the vibrant desert to the low-slung, gray-fenced horizon of FCI Dublin. It wasn't the towering fortress of steel I had imagined, but a sprawling dormitory-style complex that housed 1,200 women. Most were like Bryn, non-violent white-collar offenders who had traded their integrity for a shortcut. In the parking lot, the desert winter air felt thin and biting. I held Bryn in a hug that lasted longer than the sunrise. I could feel her shaking her breath, coming in shallow gasps against my shoulder. You're going to be okay," I whispered into her hair, my own voice betraying me. "I'll be here every month. Every single month. No matter what." "I love you, Dad," she said, her voice finally cracking as she stepped back. She turned and walked through the iron gates, carrying nothing but a small plastic bag, a Bible, a few family photos, and a fresh, empty journal. I watched until her silhouette vanished behind the heavy steel doors. I sat in my car for a long time afterward, crying for the daughter I had lost, the father I had failed to be, and the woman she was now desperately trying to become. Month 1. Bryn was assigned to Unit C Bunk 47. Her world shrank to the size of a thin mattress and a metal locker. Life became a clockwork of gray, the 6 a.m. wake-up call breakfast, in a crowded, clattering mess hall, and her assigned job in the prison library. She spent 8 hours a day shelving books for 12 cents an hour. The physical work was easy. The mental work was a battlefield. The nights were the hardest nightmares of Dominic's predatory smirk and the crushing weight of what she'd done to her mother's legacy. She wrote a letter to the foundation board offering her meager prison wages as a symbolic start to her restitution. They wrote back cold and professional, "Focus on your recovery. The foundation is moving forward without you." That night she joined the prison's Gamblers Anonymous chapter. At her first meeting, surrounded by 11 other women in a circle of plastic chairs, she introduced herself and wept through her entire story for the first time. The group leader, an older woman serving her 4th year, just nodded slowly. "One day at a time, honey. You aren't alone in this room." Month 3. Bryn was transported back to Phoenix for 3 days to testify at Dominic's trial. I watched her from the gallery, my heart in my throat. Across 30 feet of polished wood and legal pads, Dominic stared at her with a chilling, predatory hate. He tried to lock eyes with her, to use that old psychological grip. Her hands shook visibly, but when she spoke, her voice remained steady. She told the truth about the offshore wires, the fake signatures, and the hollow Barcelona dream. She didn't look at him once during her cross-examination. Back in her bunk that night, she wrote me a single sentence in her journal. "I did it, Dad. I told the truth. And for the first time, I didn't fall apart under his gaze." Month 6, the brutal summer heat baked the California valley, making the recreation yard feel like an oven. Bryn spent her hours walking the track, counting her steps like she was counting down the days. On June 15th, she filled a page in her journal with 5 concrete goals for her release. 1. Rebuild a relationship with Dad based on truth. 2. Find a job never in the nonprofit world again. 3. Pay every single cent of restitution, no matter how long it takes. 4. Stay away from every betting site. 90 meetings in 90 days. 5. Forgive myself someday. When I visited on June 20th, I brought news that Tyler had finally proposed to Emma. Bryn cried happy tears. It was the first piece of genuine family joy that hadn't been tainted by her deception. Month 12. Her early release review was a 10-minute video call that felt like a lifetime. Despite her exemplary record and completed addiction programs, the board denied her parole. They cited the significant breach of public trust. Bryn took the news with a strange, quiet calm that surprised even me. "Oh, I needed the full time," she told me during our December visit, her hand pressed against the glass. "I'm not the same person who walked in here on New Year's Day, Dad. I'm different now. I needed to sit with what I did until the guilt stopped being a weight and started being a teacher." Month 15. The prison counselor was blunt and unsentimental. 70% of white-collar offenders reoffend within 5 years. Don't become a statistic. Bryn didn't flinch. She laid out her re-entry plan with the precision of an architect, an office manager position at a local landscaping company I'd helped vet living in my guest house to save money, and mandatory weekly therapy. There would be no bridge accounts, no secret apps, and no shortcuts. Just honest, humble work. Month 18. At 6 a.m., the sun was just beginning to burn through the California mist. Bryn processed out for the last time, returning her drab prison uniform for the jeans and t-shirt she had worn 18 months ago. They felt loose on her now. She was 15 pounds lighter. Her hair was longer, and her face was etched with the fine lines of someone who had survived a war with her own soul. I was leaning against the car when the heavy doors finally hummed open. She didn't walk. She ran. We collided in the middle of the road, sobbing and holding onto each other, like we were the only 2 people left on Earth. "Welcome home, sweetheart," I said, my voice thick with relief. "I'm ready, Dad," she replied, wiping the tears from her face. "Let's go home." The 5-hour drive back to Scottsdale was the polar opposite of the first. The windows were down, letting in the hot, dry air of the Mojave Desert. Bruce Springsteen's Thunder Road played low on the radio. Somewhere near the Arizona border, Bryn fell asleep in the passenger seat, her head resting against the glass. Her breathing was deep and peaceful for the first time in years. I glanced over at her, the shadows of the passing cacti dancing across her face. She wasn't the same girl who had whispered that terrified warning to me at the engagement party. She was older, scarred, and humbled. As I steered us toward Paradise Valley, I realized that maybe that was the whole point. The clean route wasn't about erasing the past. It was about being strong enough to carry it into the future. The desert air in Paradise Valley was warm on the evening of October 24th, 2025. I sat on the patio in the exact same spot where Tyler had pulled me aside 2 years ago. The string lights overhead cast the same amber glow, but the atmosphere was unrecognizable. Back then, the air was thick with a deception I couldn't see. Tonight, it was clear. Inside the kitchen, I could hear the rhythmic chopping of vegetables and the sound of laughter. Bryn was making dinner with Tyler's help, pasta primavera, using Sarah's old recipe. 2 years ago tonight, my world fell apart. I thought watching their silhouettes through the glass. My daughter whispered a warning. My son uncovered a crime. And I learned that the people you love most can hurt you in ways you never imagined. The Caldwells, a new reality. Bryn had been home for 4 months now. At 31, She lived in the casita on my property, a small guest house that gave her the independence she needed while keeping her close. She worked as the office manager for Verde Vista Landscaping in Scottsdale. It was a humble $42,000 a year job, a far cry from the millions she once managed, but it was stable. Every month without fail, she sent a check for $1,850 to the Foundation for Restitution. She attended Gamblers Anonymous 4 nights a week. And Dad, she told me earlier today, I'll never be able to repay the trust I broke, but I'm trying. I wake up every day and choose to be better than I was yesterday. I'm still here. I'm still fighting. Tyler, now 28, had been promoted to sergeant in the Financial Crimes Unit, the youngest in the department's history. He was engaged to Emma, a kind-hearted kindergarten teacher. The rift between the siblings had been mended with daily texts and weekly dinners. Tyler told me last week, I'm proud of her dad. What she's doing, facing the mess and showing up every day, is tougher than anything I do at work. As for the Caldwell Family Foundation, it had been rebuilt from the ground up. I'd injected my own funds to cover Bryn's theft, restructured the board, and hired an external director. The focus had shifted to Sarah's true legacy, addiction recovery and financial literacy for young adults. Even Monica Graves had found peace. After I flew to Portland to thank her in June, we stayed in touch. She had rebuilt her career and was now a deputy director at the Oregon Health Authority. She even wrote Bryn a letter. You stopped him. Because of you, he can't hurt anyone else. That matters. And Dominic Vale. He was currently at USP Atwater, serving year 1 of his 20-year sentence. He had no contact with us, and his appeals had been shot down. I didn't hate him anymore. Hate takes energy I'd rather give to my children. He was a broken man who broke others, and now he was paying the price. The dinner table. Bryn brought the steaming plates of pasta to the outdoor table. Tyler and Emma followed, carrying the salad and drinks. I stood for a moment, looking up at the stars and thinking of Sarah, before Bryn touched my shoulder. Dad, dinner's ready. We sat together, 4 people, a simple homemade meal and a quiet strength. Tyler poured sparkling cider for Bryn. She hadn't touched a drop of alcohol since her release, a personal rule for her recovery. After a few minutes of light conversation about Emma's students, a silence fell over the table. Bryn raised her glass of cider. I want to say something. She began, her voice trembling slightly. 2 years ago, I was drowning. I made choices that hurt everyone at this table. I lied, I stole, and I betrayed the people I love most. And you. She looked at me, tears forming in her eyes. You had every reason to walk away, but you didn't. You fought for me when I couldn't fight for myself. I'll spend the rest of my life trying to be worth that fight. I stood up, walked over to her, and held her face in my hands. You already are, sweetheart. Every single day you already are. We hugged, and then Tyler and Emma joined in a messy, tearful, real group hug under the Arizona stars. Looking back at this journey, I realized that the scars of family betrayal are the hardest to heal. I stood by as my own blood traded our legacy for a lie. My advice: don't be like the man I once was, blind to the cracks in your home, and don't be like my daughter who let a shadow lead her into a dark room. In the quiet of the Arizona night, I understand that life isn't just about the wealth we build, but the truth we protect. We often hear of grandpa stories where wisdom is passed through peace, but mine is a cautionary tale written in the ink of deep family betrayal. I am a father who had to become a hunter to save his child, and I thank God for the strength to fight for her when she couldn't find it herself. These grandpa stories aren't always about perfect heroes. Sometimes they are about the raw, messy process of forgiveness. Trust is a fragile glass. Once shattered by family betrayal, it takes a lifetime of honest steps to glue the pieces back together. Let these grandpa stories remind you the road back to the light is long, but you never have to walk it alone. Thank you for staying with me until the very end of this journey. Please leave a comment sharing your thoughts. What would you have done if you were in Preston's shoes? That impossible situation. I'm eager to hear your perspective. If this story moved you, please consider subscribing so you won't miss our upcoming narratives. A quick note: while inspired by common social themes, certain elements have been dramatized for storytelling purposes. If this style doesn't fit your preferences, feel free to explore other content that might resonate more with you.